Everybody, thank you for joining us today and welcome to Paid Social 101 with Justin Satzman. Really fired up when we first started brainstorming this entire Academy experience. The very first session that I said to myself, we have to have is this. If you've been on some of the other sessions, you've heard me say it, but I'm going to repeat it again for those in attendance. As a creative, the next phase of skill set that I believe creatives need to be thinking about is how the money flows through the digital industry. I've worked with Justin most recently at IGN. The two of us collaborated around a bunch of branded content and campaigns. He's one of the most insightful and brilliant minds I've ever come across, and I think he's going to have a lot to share in terms of strategy, what he's done with, a popular show, NBC's This Is Us. Really fired up about everyone that's been able to attend this and what you're going to be able to learn from it. Some quick housekeeping. We have a bunch of other sessions coming up next week. This is the last one for this week, but next week we have a bunch of important ones coming up, including the second session that I thought right off the bat that we had to have, which is how to make a jersey swap in Photoshop. So really fired up about another solid week of sessions we have coming up next week, including Esports 101 with Alex Rubens. There's obviously been a lot of interest and engagement around esports given the impact of COVID-19, everyone being remote, but still being able to stream through Twitch and YouTube and all the other platforms. I think now is the time for you all to understand exactly what esports is and how potentially you can how you can participate in your own roles. So that being said, Nikki just popped in the link to sign up in the upcoming sessions. Also, please share your LinkedIn and Twitter accounts in the chat. Network amongst each other. I think it's important. I've seen so many great people. I've been able to meet so many great people throughout this entire experience, and being able to network with you all has been a really big highlight of mine. So continue to do that. And also ask questions. So there's going to be a lot of new terms that Justin's going to go over with you all today, and just chime in if you don't understand. Easy opportunity for us to help educate you today. That being said, Justin, I think you're going to be coming up on stage here in a second.
Thank you. Thank you, Nita, for the wonderful introduction and to be invited to come speak with everyone today. Can't really beat that introduction. So I'll go through a quick background about myself, and then I'll just kind of go into some quick overviews of kind of the different ad platforms that we're mainly using in the environment today. It will be very high level. I'll try not to use too many in the weeds words, but please, if there's questions, let me know. More than happy to answer. And this is meant to be a two-way street. Want to make sure I'm giving you guys all the best information that I can. And like I said, feel free to stop and ask me questions. In terms of my background, so I've been working in social media pretty much since it started. We didn't even call it social media management at the time. Just kind of started in digital marketing. And when I got out of college, my bosses were like, this kid knows what MySpace is and Twitter, and so this is going to be like the next marketing platform, so let him just handle all of it.
Wow, way to age yourself, Justin.
I know. So I started just doing on the organic side, and then I got to realize that the paid side, especially as Facebook came along and the platforms went public and started focusing on revenue, that this is going to be a whole new source of just overall marketing. And ever since paid became like a big thing, I just transitioned fully into the paid side. As most of my recent experience before Ziff and quote unquote IGN, I worked at NBC for about 5 years, and I handled all the paid social strategy for NBC broadcast. So yes, I had, anytime you saw an ad on one of the social platforms for This Is Us or The Voice or another NBC show, that was me or my team running that. And obviously working with the broadcast network, it's a good learning experience because you're normally looked at as kind of the guinea pig of the industry because obviously you're willing to be the most creative, but also spend the most money. So I took a lot from that learnings, and it's just helped me today. And I'm really excited to kind of see where the industry is going. So that's kind of my background, mostly in the entertainment side, but obviously everything that I'm going to go over can be applied to any kind of medium, any kind of, campaign, any kind of industry. And that's kind of one of the great things about social is we're seeing, it doesn't really matter what area of business you're trying to promote or trying to market. It's the capabilities are endless. And given that there's new platforms and new tools coming around, it's definitely something that we think will continue.
I think one of the things I want to stress to those people here who are mostly in the sports world is that, Justin, the sports industry right now is behind the curve with the entertainment industry in terms of paid social strategies, whereas the entertainment industry is behind the curve of the sports world in terms of organic content strategies. So there's a lot of learnings that each industry can have amongst each other in their own retrospective strengths. So I think you being here is important for everyone to understand that the sports industry is really learning from what the entertainment industry has done, particularly around This Is Us and The Voice. And so it's important for you to understand that, because most of the people that are probably tuning in right now have not really seen the in-depth workings of how a paid social campaign works.
Right. And one of the great things about, paid social in terms of how we see how the sports industry is viewed as opposed to, entertainment industries is that sports figures, and I'm just going to take, LeBron for an example. He is basically his own platform on social. He's not reliant on the network or the NBA or ESPN to help him with that. He can go in and just make his own, he's a force in and of himself. And a lot of the big name sports, sports personalities can do that. And when that happens, that provides us with a lot of research opportunities, not only for paid, but for organic as well. But yeah, I will say the sports industry has a huge upside in terms of paid social, because I don't know this offhand and I'd have to check, but I would imagine the engagement rate is probably higher amongst athletes than it would be among entertainment industries.
Oh, it definitely is. I've seen the data. It definitely is. Athletes are on a different level across the board.
And that makes sense, right? I mean, the athletes have fans who, no matter what they do, if they're on the court, on the field, or, hockey and Nike, they're going to be into it. It's a little different when you're speaking it of a brand point of view than from a person's point of view. Having said that, the tools and everything are the same. I'm going to go through kind of the tools that we use of the three different there's really four, but Facebook and Instagram are kind of combined into one. So I wanted to give everyone just kind of a little overview of what kind of the tools look like. What are the things that I see when I'm building a campaign or when I'm strategizing for a campaign even, and just how I utilize them on a daily basis, and just kind of give some high level like tips and encounters that I utilize with them, just so I can get you guys familiar with kind of what it looks like if you ever go in there, to not be terrified, and just kind of see how it can be used for any kind of market research, whether it's social, whether it's going to be paid, whether it's just reach and frequency. These tools are available to us as long as you have a business account. So it's a great tool for all types of marketing. And when I was at NBC, we utilized these tools for TRPs. And if you guys aren't familiar with TRPs, it's just a fancy word to say how many people we're going to reach with television ad buys, or who's going to be seen over the air. So my social strategy impacted over the air decisions for NBC. So I'm just trying to give like a little overview of how vital and important some of these tools are. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. So this is what the all famous Facebook Business Manager looks like. There's a couple of different layouts for this. This is the old one. I personally like the old one because it is definitely not as it's easier to use, to be perfectly honest. If you guys see a new version of this, it wouldn't surprise me. Um, but this is like the original one that you're still able to use, and just this layout to me is just much easier to read, and it helps just kind of getting all this information. But with all the social media platforms, they break it out into 3 different sections. One is your campaign, and that's like kind of like your overarching campaign. Like, what is your objective? And when I say objective, what is your main KPI? That's basically when we say objective. Is it purely driving traffic off-site? Is it video views? Is it brand awareness? Is it reach, which is another word for just purely impressions? So that's kind of where you go in and you decide on that. And this is really important because it basically tells the system what you're going to utilize, or what you're going to optimize towards. Now, there is some different, more kind of in the weeds stuff, like store traffic if you're trying to drive people actually into a physical location, catalog sales and conversions, and that gets a little bit more in the weeds. But from a high overview, for the most part, I only stick with either video views or reach. And once again, reach is just another word for impressions. And I would imagine if you're trying to keep people within these social platforms, you don't want to drive them off site. These 2 are going to be the ones that you're most going to utilize, because I feel like these are probably, in my opinion, the best 2 offerings. One is because these normally are the cheapest, and 2, in terms of retargeting later on in your campaigns, these will give you the largest retargeting audiences that you could probably build for. So with that, if I were going to choose video views, I can name my campaign, whatever. And this is kind of how we start building the campaign. Now, one thing about the campaign, as I mentioned earlier, this is also a valuable tool because it can provide you audience sizes, or it can provide you estimated budget sizes. So from the campaign, I'm going to go into what's called the ad set. Now, the ad set is kind of like what you're going to be utilizing if you're going to be testing different pieces of creative, or if you had different flights, or if you had different audiences that you wanted to target. This is kind of where you set this part up. And the reason for this is because if you have an overarching campaign, and I'm just going to take This Is Us as an example, the campaign name might be This Is Us Season 5, then an ad set could be, I only want to target current fans on Facebook and Instagram. So if I were to do that, I would choose the first thing I always do is I personally always use a lifetime budget, because there's 2 things that a lifetime budget does. It won't overspend that budget, obviously, but if you were to choose a daily budget, the one issue with a daily budget is that, let's say you're having a really good day, the competition is really low, and your cost per view is like half of a penny. If you choose a daily budget, the problem with that is, and your daily budget is like $100, you might be having a great day, and it will stop at $100. But the next day, it might be double that cost, but it will still stop at $100. So you're not really getting the best optimization that you could in that sense.
Justin, when you say competition, what do you mean by that?
So all of these work on a auction based. So when I say competition, you are basically competing with everyone else within Facebook, or in this case, Facebook or Instagram, who's also targeting the people that you're targeting. And that is determined within the audience. So like I mentioned, I was going to target This Is Us. So This Is Us TV series. Currently on Facebook, of adults 18 to 65, all genders, who have not necessarily fans, but all the social platforms call them interests. Now, the reason they do interests is it can include fans, but it could also include any user who has engaged at a social level with anything related to This Is Us. So for the reason why they do interest and not fans is because fan acquisition has been very deprioritized on Facebook and Instagram, really on the social platforms as a whole. And the dirty little secret of that is all the social platforms only allow organic posts to reach a certain segment of their fan base. The social platforms will never admit to that, but we all know it's true, and we think that the limit is about 17% of your fan base. So you could, let's say LeBron posts an organic post to 10 million fans, unless he puts amplification budget behind it, only about 17% of those 10 million fans will see that post organically. The one exception to that is if his fan base just shares that post at a very, very unusual rate. And obviously the platforms, the algorithms won't restrict what you are sharing to your friends or family, your newsfeed, for lack of a better word. That is,
so saying that distribution rate is different than engagement rate, obviously, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good point. So back to your question, Nita. So when we say competition, so let's just say I am only going to choose the only targeting I want, or This Is Us interest. Whoops, sorry about that. So with that, you will see that ages 18 to 65, all genders, This Is Us. That gives us about 24 million people with a reach of about, I think the budget I left it at. So this is, if it was a month campaign and the lifetime budget was $5,000 or $500. So with that, our estimated reach is anywhere between 2.4 thousand and 6.8 thousand. And Throughplay, which, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be optimizing towards video views. Throughplay on Facebook is a 15-second video view. However, Facebook considers a video view at 3 seconds. But we optimize at a 15-second video view, but we are charged at a 3-second video view. I know it's kind of confusing there. So that is basically our reach and everything like that, and throughout this campaign. So that is when I say competition. There could be, millions of other people who are building ads within the auction to go after this audience. So it's purely based on that competition or on that auction. So that's why when I mentioned, and if you do a daily budget, that competition could be severely fierce that one day, and the next day, maybe because that other companies or those companies' ad campaigns ended, or they decided to change their targeting parameters. That is, the auction can completely change on a daily basis. So from an optimization standpoint, I would always recommend, if you can, doing that lifetime budget. It will typically help with your costs. And then there's a couple different, obviously, options. And within this targeting, you can add and subtract, different interests. And interest, obviously adding additional interest should increase your audience size. Obviously, removing interest should decrease it. You could also build custom audiences, and that's done for a variety of different ways. Custom audiences can be built off retargeting, whether it's video retargeting, engagement retargeting, if you want to retarget someone who maybe engaged with your ad, or if you have a pixel on your website that you're trying to drive, you can use pixel retargeting. And this is the area where you could actually include them if you wanted to just do pure retargeting.
Question on that front, actually. So I'm going to here so you can see it. With the Facebook pixel set up on our ticket page, we obviously want to sell tickets. Do you recommend a traffic or conversion objective, knowing that we can send them an abandoned cart email if they hit our landing page? This is like a very advanced question for those of you that are in the intro side, but it's relevant to this.
Yeah, I would always do a conversion if you have the ability. Basically, conversions will always be much better options if that's what you're going for. And ticket sales is a great opportunity for that. The reason being is because the more, I guess, the more precise or the more qualified the user you can get, that is always kind of the best thing for, that is always the best way to obviously optimize to what you're going for. So when I say optimize, what it's basically doing is it will look at which users are fulfilling that KPI. Then we'll look at other users on the platform who fall within those targeting parameters, and then who are most likely to complete that same behavior. So conversions in that instance would be the more so than traffic, because a traffic, if you do it by just pure click, or if you do it by what they call a landing page view, which is a little bit, a little bit more in the weeds, that is still not as good as actually selling that ticket or conversion optimization in that point. So I would always go with the most precise or the most qualified optimization that you could, because that is what you ultimately are driving towards. Now, it might be a little bit more expensive just because that is a much more qualified user, but it will still be a much more qualified user, which to me is the most expensive, which is the most important thing that you can receive. So I'm going to go back to here. And as mentioned earlier, there's different exclude. If you wanted to negative retarget people, you could do that. So let's say you only wanted to reach, like negative or excluding or negative retargeting is really good with custom audiences. But this is where you kind of go with all your audience parameters. And this to me is really important because it truly gives you a size of the audience that you're targeting within, and then also the cost that it will be associated with. And you can use this as a great planning tool. So let's say you wanted to get that, it's 6,000, 7,000 people out of 24 million isn't very much. So what if you put 5,000? And you can see how your reach on a daily basis obviously increases. So it is a great planning tool for anyone who's thinking about putting budget behind a Facebook campaign.
Real quick on this, Justin, 2 questions. First, on the potential reach, is it better when you're building a campaign to go a mile wide, or is it better to narrow that and go a little bit deeper on the targeting?
Good question. I personally think it's better to go larger than smaller at right away, because you don't necessarily know how your audience is going to react to the optimization. So for example, if your costs are really cheap and you're seeing that maybe you want to get a more qualified audience out of that, then you can slow down your reach, or you can decrease your budget or your overall budget without necessarily negatively impacting your costs. So the bigger the audience, the likelihood of a cheaper cost, obviously, because there's more people to kind of choose from. So the smaller your audience goes, the more expensive it typically gets. So with that, I would, and every campaign is completely different, obviously. So with that, I would definitely recommend kind of going a little bit more broad, and then if necessarily narrowing if necessary. The pitfall with going the other way is if your audience is too small and you're seeing that it's affecting your cost and you try to go bigger, it may not have as much time to optimize depending on the flight of your campaign to be able to fully take advantage of that. So I would rather have the optimization running in place and getting a good cost and a really good showcasing of the optimization than going the other way around. But like I said, every campaign is different. But I would generally, if you're trying to go broad, that would be my first recommendation.
Gotcha. And the second question I had was in terms of budget. If you had to break it down to a $1 investment, for every $1 that you're putting into Facebook or Instagram, what is the impact on reach and through play? Meaning, if it's just $1, how much on average are you actually going to see? Because the scale that they give you, it's not accurate typically.
When you're saying, so are you asking like if I put in $1 in, how many video views am I going to get from that?
Yeah.
Typically, I have seen, and this kind of goes into what I was going to go to next, but when you choose your placement. But for the most part, I normally see a cost per view of around a penny. I've seen it cheaper. I've had campaigns that have gone 0.003 cents. There was one campaign I ran on The Voice where it was actually 0.000 for a period of time. So it was like we were literally running free media for the most part. So I would say that Facebook tends to be a little bit. These estimates are always, they're not accurate in terms of what you might actually pay. This is just a snapshot of what this audience generally receive based on this flight and based on this budget. Now, it is a large.
We find that for every $1 you invest, you can buy yourself 100 views on Facebook.
I mean, there obviously are, qualifications to that. It depends on your creative. It depends on your targeting. It depends on your flight. But for the most part, if you're paying anything above like a penny and a half for a video view, unless your audience is incredibly small and incredibly qualified, I would definitely look at your creative, or I would think about expanding your budget. Unless, you want only to reach that certain segment of people and, that's all you care about. Obviously, costs will increase more if you're doing something like app downloads or the conversions, as we mentioned earlier. Those are, if we can keep an app download in like the $1 range on Facebook, that would be considered a win. Obviously, honestly, Facebook and Twitter have not been the best performers in terms of app downloads. So if that's one of you're more interested in those, I would probably look to Google for those, especially Google search. And I know this is kind of more on social, but I've run SEO campaigns with app downloads that are much cheaper than like Facebook and Twitter for app downloads.
Cool.
So one thing I also wanted to bring out is placements. So obviously, you guys, when you think of Facebook and Instagram, you probably mainly think of only the newsfeed because that's what you guys spend most of your time in. But you might surprise you to know that there are tons of different Facebook placements that people utilize. And there's even tons with the different platforms. So Facebook has 4 different what they call platforms for ads. So there's Facebook itself and Instagram, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And then Messenger, which is, Facebook's Messenger service that does not include, that is just Facebook Messenger only. I know Facebook owns different other messaging services. For some reason, I'm blanking on the name right now. And then the Audience Network. So the Audience Network is actually utilizing Facebook's targeting capabilities outside of Facebook within certain publications that Facebook partners with. So those are the 4 different types of platforms. I generally only utilize Facebook and Instagram for the most part. Messenger, for not a ton of people use Messenger for as much as you would think. It's not that it's a bad platform, but from a reach perspective, it's generally not as nearly like you'll have with Facebook and Instagram. And then the Audience Network is generally something that you have to worry about a little bit more in terms of brand safety. Not that Facebook partners with any publisher that wouldn't be brand safe all the time, but you kind of have to go through a different conversation when you get outside of social. And then there's also a different conversation when in terms of outside of social with tagging. And Facebook doesn't actually allow third-party tags. So going outside of the social walls and not using third-party tags is always kind of a, interesting conversation. So within the most part, I would generally stick to Facebook and Instagram. And as you can see, by selecting those 2 platforms only, you will see that it had an impact on, the daily results. or yeah, the estimated daily results. And within those platforms, you have the different placements. And there's quite a few of them. The good news is they give you an example of what it kind of looks like. So feeds, Facebook and Instagram newsfeed, which most of the traffic will appear on. There's no doubt about that. Then there's Facebook Marketplace. If you guys have ever tried to sell something with using Facebook's Marketplace, there's ads that go in there as well. There's video feeds, which is basically just Facebook suggested video. If you guys have ever actually completed a video on Facebook, it will go into some suggested videos, and you can actually bid or pay to be at the front of those users. Suggested video or Facebook video feeds. This is actually one of the best placements in terms if you wanted to get video with sound on. Most of the video within Facebook and Instagram, all social platforms, is sound off. When it runs in the news feed, the user has to take an initiative to turn the volume on, even if the user has headphones and their sound is on. They actually have to take a user initiative to turn the sound on. The exception is Facebook video feeds. That sound is automatically on when the user is watching that. Then Instagram Explore is very similar to Facebook video feeds, but obviously with Instagram, it started as a photo platform or static image. So this also allows for static images and then not just video. I'm sure everyone has heard of stories. Instagram stories being the main one, obviously the clone of Snapchat. Instagram came out with a research project, I would say it was probably over a year and a half, probably 2 years ago, that said at the end of this year or possibly at the beginning of next year, there will actually be more users or people would be utilizing the stories features more so than the newsfeed features within Instagram. Obviously, Instagram stories and newsfeed is a huge, it's very different in terms of the type of creative, the creative limitations. For example, this one's full screen, as you can see within Instagram stories. When you go up to Instagram newsfeed, it's not full screen, it's square or vertical. These placements, you have to really kind of think about your creative and what best places your creative will live in. It's not just, you can just choose a creative, select all and watch it, but obviously a user's experience with a vertical video in Instagram stories will be very different than a user's experience within the newsfeed of Facebook. So you really have to kind of think about your creative strategy as well as your targeting strategy for these placements. And a lot of people kind of don't realize that, especially with the dominance of what we're seeing with Instagram and mainly Instagram stories, although Facebook stories are being utilized not to the same extent as Instagram stories. And then Messenger has their own version as well.
I'm over Instagram stories.
No one else seems to be because it keeps growing.
I've always been ahead of the curve.
True. Are you on TikTok, Nita?
I'm on it, but I'm more of like a stalker. TikTok's one of those rabbit holes. When you open it, you just look up and it's like an hour later because you've been laughing your ass off the entire time. Very true.
In-stream is just a fancy Facebook word for mid-roll. That's all Facebook in-stream is. This is also a place where sound on is hugely important because sound on is here. Because Facebook, if you're watching a mid-roll video, Facebook is going to assume that you're interested in the video and the sound is going to be on. So another place where sound on will happen is in this mid-roll. The one thing about this mid-roll is it can't be longer than 15 seconds. So again, have to be really, really strategic with your creative when you're utilizing in-stream, if you're going to be utilizing it. And personally, in my opinion, in-stream has become a huge benefit for quick messages. Like when I was at NBC, if we had a tune in tonight message, that we would only run it, or our main focus was on in-stream. What can you display in 15 seconds that's memorable? Well, The Voice is back tonight. This Is Us is on tonight to This Is Us fans. this is a great place if you're looking for a quick reminder for users to just see your ad and then have your messaging, have your messaging be detailed in those quick 15 seconds. The rest of them, I would say you don't have to worry about as much. In article is if you wanted to utilize kind of that portion of people who read articles on Facebook. This one, I've tested it. It's not the greatest place for video. If you have more of offsite, like conversions, as the question was brought up earlier, this would kind of be the area where you might test that. But so kind of my overall hope with this portion is to make sure that you guys are choosing the correct audience, but also the correct placements and platforms for your creative. And this is to me, the ad set is probably the most important strategic part of your strategy if you're going to be utilizing paid social, because this is the portion that provides you with most of your answers. Where should your ad live? What targeting should you include? What type of budget will that get you in terms of reach and video views? And do I need to increase budget? Do I need to decrease budget? And so forth. So, and honestly, this is probably the most important tab that I deal with on a daily basis.
Justin, this is awesome. If you had to say the best bang for your buck when it comes to Facebook and Instagram's tool set of ads, where would you say your best ROI is probably going to be? I know you have to obviously take into the variables of what the campaign is, but
yeah,
9 times out of 10, my go-to is this.
And you know what? One of the benefits of Facebook owning both of them is you could run the same piece of creative with the same targeting on both. And
no one uses Facebook anymore.
I mean, for a reach standpoint, people do. I will say Instagram newsfeed these days is much cheaper with video views. I don't think I've paid a penny on Instagram in months for a video view. It's been under a penny, whereas Facebook is kind of more closer to the penny or sometimes a little bit over. I would say just based on the usage of Instagram, Instagram stories and Instagram news feeds, if you're just driving. Now, Facebook is better in terms of overall reach just because it's a bigger platform. But in terms of bang for your buck, Instagram, to me, by far, is the superior platform. And that's for entertainment. I couldn't imagine that isn't the same case for sports.
Yeah. Cool.
But the cool thing about this too is so theoretically, this piece of creative that I'm running will live on all these checks placements, and then the system will optimize towards the best performing platform and placement. So most of the time I have seen Instagram feed be the best performing platform and placement. Well, Instagram being the best platform, Instagram feed be the best performing placement. So the majority of budget will just be spent there. And then quickly, this is where you go in and just build your ad. You can upload it with a video. In this case, it's a video. You can use an existing post. So if you wanted to choose a post that you posted organically and that you just wanted to boost it, this is where you would do that. And the good thing is here that you could create text. You could add a URL if you wanted to drive people to a URL. Even if it's optimized towards a video view, you could still add a URL with the call to action. And all of those clicks to that URL will just be considered added value, as will all other engagements. But yeah, this is kind of the overview on Facebook on how you build an ad.
Got a couple of quick questions here.
Yeah.
Oh, this one's from Sam Evans. It's a rookie question. If I run a 1 to 2 minute video ad on Instagram for 7 days to an audience of all 13 to 18-year-olds, how much should I expect to pay? Plus, how do I know how many users in that demographic I reached versus didn't?
So That's a great question. And I would use the tool for that, because you could actually, within the tool that I just showed you, if you were going to choose by location, which let me share again. You could actually search by that location. So I forgot what that zip code was, but let's just say I wanted to choose my zip code.
It's 29841.
The 29841. Cool. So it's somewhere outside Augusta. I'm guessing that's Georgia. So if we were going to use this as an example, and again, this is if we were only targeting This Is Us in this case on these platforms, you will see that that has a potential reach of only 3,800 people. So as I mentioned earlier, the smaller your audience being, the more expensive it's gonna cost. In terms of what you would expect to pay, I would definitely think you're gonna go from like that cent to cent and a half to probably much. I would say more like the 5, 6, 7 cent route, just based on audience size. Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is if you're going to be super qualified with your audience, in this case, this is us interest only within this zip code. Obviously, that's going to be a much different type of campaign than would you be nationally. But again, you could utilize this tool to be able to see what your potential audience reach would be.
So to your point earlier about being wide in what your potential reach is, one of the inadvertent benefits is obviously that it's going to help keep costs down.
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah. So always keep in mind, the less qualified, whether it's be location, whether it be interest targeting or just pure audience size, the less qualified equals larger audience equals cheaper costs. And that just kind of has to be a balance with whatever campaign you guys are running in terms of, what's your main KPI or what's your main priority in terms of, what's your, I guess, main KPI. Like if it's worth to you, the client, whoever you're working on behalf, to pay that difference in cost to only drive users from right outside of Augusta, Georgia, as opposed to driving users throughout the country or the whole state of Georgia, that is definitely something that you guys will have to decide. I will say one of the great things that Facebook does as well is it goes by DMAs. So a DMA is kind of another TV term, but it basically includes that whole area. So if you want someone in Atlanta, if you just typed in Atlanta, it would only include those users who were actually within the quote unquote city limits. But if you went by a DMA, it would include those city limits and the surrounding areas. And where I've noticed a huge difference when DMA came out was when I had to only target people in New York and LA. And when I include DMAs, it's a huge difference in terms of just New York City, because then I'm not including New Jersey. I'm not including the Valley. It's a huge difference in terms of reach and cost. But that kind of goes with what is the main priority of that individual campaign. But again, this just shows the importance of this tool.
Got a couple more questions real quick. Yeah. Is that 17% organic reach across all of social media business accounts, or is that specifically to sports?
So that is across any kind of business page on Facebook. And that 17% isn't confirmed. The Facebook, Twitter will never admit that, but we have been able to just garner information that we have seen that our percentage of organic reach based on the algorithmic changes that the platforms have made. And that's pretty much been the percentage that we've seen. And we've also heard, from like leaks and like news reports out of Facebook that 17% is about the area that we've heard that they restricted to. So it doesn't matter if it's sports, if it's entertainment, if it's pharmaceuticals, if it's politics. From an organic standpoint, you should only expect to reach about 17, I would say 20% at most of your organic audience without paid amplification dollars. So when someone says, "Oh, social doesn't need budget," you can basically come to them and say, "If you post this, it's likely only going to reach about 20% of our existing audience."
I miss the good old days when pay to play wasn't a thing.
Yes.
You used to post something.
Well, that was before they went public.
It was before you could be able to post something without any media, just text.
Yep.
And that thing would the engagement rates back in the day were so high, whereas now it's, as we've discussed, you get a 20% bucket, and then everything else you got to pay to play.
Exactly.
Another question from Matt. Justin, do you have experience with whitelisting influencer athlete accounts and creating sponsored posts from their accounts? If so, any chance you can run people through a quick tutorial on how to whitelist?
Yeah, so that is a great question. I've never done it with athletes, but I've done it with NBC talent, and it works exactly the same. So Facebook and Instagram have what they call, some people call it the handshake tool. It's technically called a branded content tool. And I will show you guys, let me just find one. And I'm sure you've seen one, you've probably never even noticed what exactly it was, but this is the branded content tool. I know you can't see my page yet because I'm bringing it up.
Paid partnership up at the top, handshakes, good old days.
Yep. So Facebook has this is what the branded content tool looks like. So this came from IGN, and it was a paid partnership with PlayStation. So basically what this is saying is that this is a branded content post, and in this case, a paid post with partnership from PlayStation. Now, this could be IGN with LeBron. This could be IGN with Jumpman. It doesn't matter what it is. The main reason for this is it's basically the whitelisting tool on Facebook, and Instagram has a very similar product as well, which I can show here, and we can see paid partnership with PlayStation. So this is kind of the tool that we utilize for that. In terms of qualifications or in terms of any different aspect of the campaign, it doesn't really do much anything else other than tell to the user that this is a post on behalf of that. There are some different tools that you could do. Like, for example, let's say you wanted access to that user's business account because they wanted to run it on behalf of them. This is kind of the tool that you would utilize for that. It's, that's kind of higher in the weeds, but in terms of quote unquote whitelisting or handshaking, this is the process, and more than happy to follow up with the instructions on this. All you have to have is a business manager, and then whoever has access to that page itself will have to just grant you access. It literally can be done in 10 seconds. From PlayStation standpoint, though, considering they don't have access to IGN's business account, they don't have any insight into any of the amplification campaigns that we were running on their behalf. However, if for whatever reason someone wanted access to that, we could grant them access to those campaigns. They could see, oh, well, these are the campaigns that we're running based off of PlayStation, or if you were running it based on someone else. Twitter actually has a really good whitelisting tool, and it's, in my opinion, it's actually better than Facebook's. The reason being is I don't have an example of it right now. I'll be more than happy to look for one and email them back. But what it basically says is it has a normal tweet. Just find a promoted post. So let's just say, let's say Uber and Tesla, for whatever reason, had a partnership, and Tesla was advertising on behalf of Uber, announcing that. So it would actually look like Uber was promoting it, and it would have their logo, it would have this video, but instead of where it says promoted right here, it would have promoted, and then it would have in little parentheses, it would have paid on behalf of Tesla. So it's much more, I guess, it looks like that message is actually coming from those users or from that handle. And it's kind of funny, the way that you get whitelisted on Twitter is you literally just have to have someone who has admin access to that Twitter account send an email to their Twitter rep. Twitter is years behind in terms of kind of its capabilities and easiness of use than Facebook is. So it is a little bit more hands-on, but there are different types of tools that Twitter makes available that Facebook does, and that's just one really good example of that. And when you do that, you're actually running out of your business account on Twitter. So even though it looks like it's coming out of that whitelisted account, you actually are getting the benefits of all the ads for future campaigns, whether it's retargeting later down the line, and all those insights as well for your campaign reports.
Got a couple more questions, but I wanted to quickly check in with you because we're running short on time. Was there anything else that you were kind of going to start running us through?
No, I mean, I was. If you guys wanted just a quick overview of what the other ad platforms look like, I would say Twitter, for the most part, is exactly the setup process is very similar. You basically should just keep this on, but again, you choose based on your KPI, promoted video views, awareness, conversions, app installs. One thing that Twitter is kind of new with is it has pre-roll now, and I've had great success with pre-roll. Again, pre-roll, it's unskippable for the first 6 seconds, and then after that, it's skippable. But one of the great things that the pre-roll option lets you guys do, and this is really helpful in my days at NBC, is that it actually lets you actually gives you a list of publications that you can run in front of. So let's just say you guys, obviously sports, if you wanted to be guaranteed to run on ESPN only or Fox Sports or CBS Sports, you could actually choose those lists of publications to run in front of. Now, it still goes into the auction portion of the campaign, so you will be competing with other users who are trying to run in front of them. But in terms of, I guess, brand safety or wherever you want to be in front of, in-stream is a great place to be on Twitter. Pre-roll is a great place to be on Twitter because the competition seems to be much lower. But again, it's skippable. It's not skippable for the first 6 seconds. So you have to, again, think of your creative in terms of what's going to best resonate with your target audience and know that they might only pay attention for 6 seconds. And then on YouTube, it's very similar. If you're going to do brand reach or brand awareness and reach, if you're going to do product brand consideration, website traffic, sales. So more than happy to kind of do a deep dive if, as a follow-up, if we wanted to actually go into YouTube or Twitter, but they all run on a very similar process.
Well, Justin, we got a couple questions here coming in. Let me pop them up. One from Eric Davies. Would you recommend starting off optimizing for conversions or doing a high-level campaign like video views to the whole market and then retargeting that audience for conversions?
That's a great question. And yes, the reason I would do that is because it kind of helps with your qualifications already. And this is kind of more of a deeper dive, but on Facebook and Instagram, you could actually build a retargeting audience off of someone who, let's say, who completed a video or who finished 50% of it. There's many different ways to kind of build your retargeting audience, but it's a good step for qualifications. And I actually would recommend building a retargeting audience and then building off that retargeting audience for all campaigns. One of the things that Nita heard me say while I was at NBC, we both worked together, was at NBC. I actually did a ton of brand lift studies and audience segment studies for over a year that I basically found that my retargeting audience no matter the KPI, outperforms Facebook, Instagram's, and Twitter's and YouTube's actual interest audience. And in terms of cost and in terms of performance, I would get cheaper cost using a retargeting audience or building a lookalike audience off that retargeting audience than just going into Facebook's and choosing an audience. So yes, I would highly recommend qualifying your audience in some way, especially if your end KPI is conversions, because that's generally going to be more expensive anyway. But the good news is with Facebook and Instagram, you could build retargeting audiences off of organic posts. So you don't even need to spend money to make that audience. If you have organic posts, you could literally go and select them and build that audience without spending a dime.
Next question from Frank Garland. What is Facebook's perspective on influencers promoting or including promotional mentions embedded in a post or story?
So Facebook perspective, and that's kind of why they came up with the branded content tool. They obviously
want to get paid.
What?
They want to get paid.
They want to make sure they're getting their cut of revenue. We have been dinged while I've been at IGN for running branded content and not giving the right kind of call outs for it. So they don't mind it. They just want to make sure that they're getting their sense of revenue. And when they want to make sure that the messaging is appropriate. So that's kind of why they have the branded content or the handshake tool more than anything. So their perspective is they don't mind it as long as they're getting a cut, to be perfectly honest.
And last question from me. I don't know who this is. What are your thoughts on Facebook lead ads? Do you think the ease, fewer clicks outweigh the website visit and additional tracking and potential value of that traffic?
So great question. I haven't done too much with lead ads, to be perfectly honest. I have seen research that says the question would be yes. Obviously, the less kind of hoops that you go through as a user, the more likely that you're going to be successful. And I will also say that anytime you're able to keep that look and feel, you will likely be more receptive to it. One of the reasons, and I mentioned this earlier, that Facebook came up with what they call a landing page view. Now, you can optimize what Facebook calls a landing page view, which is actually when someone clicks a link and that destination page actually loads. The reason why we choose that over clicks is because we have seen that when a user clicks on something and they realize they've been taken outside of the Facebook or Instagram environment, they just immediately close it. And we've seen that rate up to 60%, 70%. So you don't want to pay for 70% of users who are just immediately going to close your ad or their destination page just because they were taken outside of that page. So that's kind of why we've seen Facebook come up with this landing page view option or this lead ad option, because it kind of keeps that look and feel of the platform itself. But we've also seen that if a user is going to be taken off, they prefer to be to not be confused by it. And if we're going to do that to them, yeah, we might pay a little bit more in premium, but the quality is much, much better.
Well, Justin, a friend of yours, say hi real quickly. He missed
Reg.
very much.
I miss Reg too.
Thank you so much for this today. It was incredibly helpful. I know that when it comes to the group of people that have been tuned into this, understanding the paid side of social is really going to be impactful for them as they continue to grow in their own careers. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Hope you and everyone else out there stays safe.
Yep. And my advice to you guys is to just, if you're new to it, just give it a try. It's $100. You might get a ton of learnings. It might feel terrifying, but you'll see how much actual research and insight you get from it. And then one thing too is working in the influencer marketplace. You can apply so many key learnings from it, and you'll notice that social is kind of the best testing ground, but also mass reach. So it can be your learning, your testing, and your overall campaign, and it's always going to be the cheapest, in my opinion.
I've been testing out with my dog's Instagram page a lot of campaigns to see how it works, because if you're not in tune with all the changes that are happening, you're going to be out of touch. So it's been fun to stay in touch, but also the impact of a skill set like this, it can influence a lot of things, i.e. 2016. But thank you again. I appreciate it. Thank you to everyone.
Yep.
Have a wonderful
Thanks, guys. And please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. More than happy to help in any way that I can.
Nikki dropped the networking document in the chat. Link is in there.
Perfect. All right, guys, everyone, please stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.